Hello again, everyone. Our final guest and speaker today is David Kong. You probably know him best as the recent past president and CEO of Best Western Hotel Group. Just this month, David has launched a nonprofit organization called DEI Advisors, where he functions as the founder and principal. And I'm so very happy to have David Kong with us today to wrap up the end of our program and to give us some ideas and experiences of his own that have inspired his own next step in his trajectory. David, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thanks very much, Beth. I appreciate the kind invitation. It's wonderful to have the chance to speak to your audience also. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I do want to just jump right into it because I know we're limited on time today. You came to the US early in your career. Tell me about what experiences you had coming up through the ranks of hospitality and that really discouraged you as an immigrant working to climb the ladder, and what experiences were maybe the most motivating? I think that this is a really interesting story that you have, and I'd like for you to have the opportunity to tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, that's a very good question. As an immigrant, obviously, you would face your fair share of biases, regrettably. And for me, I started my career in Hawaii and in the 70s, and in Hawaii, as we all know, it's about 75% Asian Pacific Islanders mix. And regrettably, at that time in the hotel industry, you wouldn't see any Asian representation in upper level management. I mean, you might see an Asian as a human resources person or front office manager, but not many above that level of position. So it was kind of discouraging at that time. And that was one of the reasons I decided to pursue my career in the mainland. I actually came to the mainland because I needed to give myself a broader horizon and more opportunities. And along the way, there were always people that somehow conveyed a certain bias. And I don't want to call it necessarily racially biased or gender bias. It's just the way they conduct themselves. They definitely show a bias. And, you know, for example, I remember I was doing a really good job at a hotel, a very large hotel, where I was excelling in all aspects of the performance, whether it's guest satisfaction or revenue growth or profitability. And I just wasn't getting anywhere. I wasn't getting promoted, wasn't getting recognized. I was very discouraged to the point where I actually put my house on the market and was ready for a move until I had the opportunity to talk to the president of the company. And a month later, I got promoted. So, I mean, these things happen. And along the way, I kind of learned that it's not very constructive to think of it as discrimination. It just doesn't get you anything, and people resent that. And it's much better to think progressively and constructively about the situation and figure out what to do. Now, there were many encouraging things that happened along the way too. For example, when I was ready to leave the hotel industry and try consulting for a while, I interviewed with two companies, and both companies were very eager to pursue me. And they really liked the experience that I had. They valued my knowledge base and they liked my intellect, and they offered me great positions. And I ended up working for KPMG Consulting, and that was very encouraging to me. And also at Best Western Hotels and Resorts, I had 5 promotions in a short 3.5 years. That was very gratifying. And clearly, my ethnic background had nothing to do with it. People just valued what I brought to the table. So that was very encouraging too.
Yeah, that's good. And that's really what I know one of your messages has been, just value what the individual brings to the table. And that is such an important message to give out to corporate America at all levels, no matter what industry. So I know that you believe very much in individual empowerment. What advice do you have for diverse individuals, whether that's women, people representing minority groups, LGBTQ plus, to step forward and differentiate themselves from the crowd? How can they do that successfully when a lot of times many of these individuals have spent their lives kind of trying to fit in?
Yeah, I think it's hard to not feel that bias if you were a woman or one of the minority groups. For women, I've seen plenty of situations where they were excluded from the ability to network. They don't get invited to golf outings. They don't get invited to social hours after work. And they just don't have the same ability to network. And that really harms the ability to grow the career. And for us minority groups, we're just different, right? And we look different. We sometimes talk differently, and we definitely think differently. And we don't fit the mold. And sometimes when you don't fit the mold, you don't feel like you belong. And that's not a very good feeling sometimes when you don't feel like you belong. And it's hard not to be depressed and angry at times. And I always tell myself, think about this constructively, because if you're upset and you think the world is not being fair to you, first of all, nobody is going to like you because you have a chip on the shoulder. And then secondly, that entitlement mentality that like the world owes me is also offensive. So I try to put myself in a better frame of mind. I try to shift how I think about things. I try to shift from thinking, well, the world is not fair to me and I'm really upset, to what can I do about a situation? And I think constructively about what is causing this challenge to happen. What can I do about the situation? And I go do something constructive. And when you do something, it always gives you a feeling that you're in better control and you feel better about the situation. It sets up a virtuous circle. So I always like to be constructive and positive in how I think about these situations. The other thing is, if you're negative, you would find evidence to support how you look at things. That's always the case. You always find evidence to support whatever way you think about something, you always find evidence to support your viewpoint. And that's not healthy because it sets up a vicious circle. So I just urge people to, when you're in that situation, just stop for a minute, take a deep breath, and try to shift your mindset. Think about it positively and constructively.
So I know you've sort of used this term head trash, and I feel like that's what you're referring to here. And in your organization, DEI Advisors, that's something that you address really upfront. You want to tell me a little bit about head trash and what that means?
I believe that we all have head trash. Doesn't matter how successful you are, you will have head trash. It's that ugly voice that inhibits your potential. It's ugly voice that tells you you're not good enough. It's hard not to have it, and everyone has it. It's just how we deal with it. When you don't have a head trash talk in your mind, think about how you put yourself in a positive frame of mind. That's what I call being proactive. You always want to be in a positive frame of mind. So, for example, I read in a book, Head Trash, which is a really good book. I highly recommend that. The author, Renee Caballari, talks about thinking about a word of the day. Like the word of the day for her could be kind, could be gratitude, could be love, could be, whatever it is that puts you in a positive frame of mind, and try to practice that the whole day. Yeah. But when you do get that ugly voice that's telling you all these negative thoughts that you're not good enough, you don't fit, whatever it might be, it's really important to stop and shift your mindset. And it's a habit that you need to give yourself, because it's hard not to be upset and frustrated and disappointed when things happen. It's just how fast you snap out of it and what you do about it. So the shifting of the mindset to being constructive and proactive is really important. Give yourself something constructive to do. Yeah. Figure out what you need to do.
So I know that you've mentioned the sort of differentiators of diverse individuals and what they bring to the table. I want to ask you about your cultural background and what you brought new to the table in your own roles, especially as you approach more senior levels in your career. And what did you do either? Well, actually, maybe we should answer the first part of that question first. So just personally, how has your cultural background actually benefited you and advanced you in ways that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise?
I actually am very gratified and happy that I grew up in Hong Kong. I went to a Jesuit high school, got a very good education. The Jesuit fathers were such dedicated people. They trained me to be intellectually curious, to always ask questions. So in terms of how my background has helped me, well, Hong Kong is a highly efficient market. I mean, they don't have any natural resources. They basically add value to everything that they touch, and they're highly efficient in what they do. For example, they built the Cross Harbor Tunnel in 1 year. I mean, that's like, you heard about the Big Dig and all these different infrastructure projects take us years and years to complete. They're just highly efficient. So everywhere I went, I brought that efficiency to the table. I always ran the most cost-effective operation, highly efficient, and highly focused on results, very results-driven. I am also able to think differently about things because of my upbringing. Frequently in meetings, I'd be asking questions, and I would find that it would challenge people's previous assumptions and cause them to think differently about the problem, perhaps redefining the problem and coming up with different solutions that are more effective. So I think those things are really good. I mean, that's part of why diversity is important, because it does stimulate a different way of thinking about things.
Yeah, it definitely does. And in terms of what you brought then to your roles, either at Best Western Hotel Group or in other senior roles that you had, how did you then either personally or programmatically bring diversity through that channel that you were able to forge?
Yeah, I know from my background, I talk about the different ways of thinking about things or the different attributes we bring to the table. For example, for me, it's being efficient. It's also the ability to understand different culture. And therefore, for example, I was made Executive Vice President of International Operations because I do need to have in that position, one needs to have a better understanding of how different cultures work.
Right.
And for me at Best Western, I've always valued that. DEI wasn't a buzzword back it's only become a buzzword the last couple of years. And then we had a pandemic before that. And so back in 2018, 2019, who's even heard of DEI, right? So it's all about how much we all value diversity, inclusion, and equity. And for me, I think from 2015 or 2016, we've allowed a flexible schedule. We've allowed moms to come and go as their schedule might require them to. For example, they can come into work later, they can go home earlier, but because I know that they would work after the kids go to bed and 9 o'clock they turn on the laptop and they work till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I've gotten emails from them. I'm not one that's focused on how many hours you put in or what time they show up for work, what time you leave. I'm more focused on what value you add and what results you achieve. So we've allowed that flexible work schedule back in the 2015 or 2016. We've also had many different programs to try to develop people. For example, I'm a believer of 7 habits for highly effective people. And I implemented a program where we have master trainers. We train our people to be master trainers, to train others on the 7 habits. We also do MBA style case studies where we have cross-functional groups work together on a case study, and they have to present to a bigger group. So we do a lot of things to try to cultivate talent and embrace diversity and different ways of doing things.
And is that something you instituted during your leadership. Yeah. And what did you think the result of that was? What changed?
What changed was highly engaged workforce. People feel valued. They feel like, oh, the company gets it, and upper management gets it. That a mom is still able to contribute, although she might have 3 kids at home, and she might need some flexibility at work. And they feel valued, and therefore much more engaged. The cross-functional team, frequently comprised of minority and women, working with Caucasians, are also highly effective, because then you have breakthrough thinking. It really, people talk about diversity sparking creativity and ushering and innovation. That's absolutely true.
Right.
I've seen that happen firsthand.
Great. One of the things and one of the reasons that we are holding these symposium is because corporate travelers are asking questions during the sourcing process about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the programs that you just mentioned are things that they're asking about. What is happening at your hotel? What is happening at your airline that aligns with the DE&I initiatives that the buying company might also have internally? Or how can you develop through your supply chain more diverse and equitable market? So do you think corporate sourcing and procurement initiatives are an effective way to drive this kind of change in the hospitality industry? As buyers, I think we like to think that we have some power over sort of how the industry shapes itself. And do you think that is the case?
That is absolutely the case, and I'm so excited that corporate travel buyers are having this requirement on their RFPs. Corporate travel buyers, like you said, has a lot of leverage and power. They do effectuate change. When they ask for something in RFPs, things happen. Whether it's safety and security at hotels or other things that they might require on the RFPs, they do drive change. So recognize the important position that corporate travel buyers have, and the way that they can effectuate change, especially in something like this.
Yeah.
You see, what happens is when travel buyers require this on the RFP, it causes a company to, first of all, think about, oh, if they are paying attention to this, this must be important. So it adds credibility to the whole DEI initiative or effort. It gives it importance in the organization. Secondly, it forces accountability, because now they have a report card they have to provide. They have to document their progress. So all this is driving tremendous behavior change. And I think it's great. It's absolutely wonderful.
Good. And do you think that the hospitality and travel industries are responding well to this, and they're putting the initiatives in place and putting the metrics in place to, to show that something's really happening here?
Yeah, I think for the most part, especially the larger hospitality companies, doing that, whether it's airlines or hotels. I just talked to Mark Albanesian. He was on our show just recently, and he talked about the commitment that he's making in this area. And he talks about a very holistic and comprehensive program. For example, one component is about attracting, recruiting, retaining, developing, and promoting diverse talent. And he's got a whole scorecard set up to do that. He's got a whole program set up to back it up. And he sets he sets specific measurements to track his progress. I think this is wonderful. And he has a Rise High program, which targets underserved communities. They try to recruit talent from there and develop that talent. And he's got a partner vendor kind of program, which is also very targeted in this DEI initiative. And I think that's just wonderful. Yeah. Those are just some examples of the progress that I'm seeing.
Good. If you could do one thing, if you could implement one thing in the industry right now, or take one action that you think would make a difference to push the industry to embrace more diversity, what would you want to do, or what would you want to see the industry really take action on to make change?
I've led a fair number of changes, big changes in my career. And the one thing I've learned is it cannot be just a program,
Right.
because the people in the organization knows that there's always a program to do. If it's a program, it comes and goes and people just pay it lip service and they go through the motion and it doesn't stick. So if we want DEI to stick, we need to make it part of our culture. It needs to be in people's value and beliefs. And it won't happen unless the executive leadership, especially the CEO, talks about why it's important. It's not just the right thing to do, it's the good thing to do for the company. And he needs to talk about how diversity and inclusion equity helps elevate everyone's thinking, because it does stimulate creativity, it does spark innovation, and it does cause one to reflect on his or her way of thinking and perhaps elevate that thinking. So he needs, that CEO, he or she needs to talk about why it's important to the company, why it's important to the individual, how we can all win with DEI. He needs to quote examples from McKinsey and Company. He needs to quote examples from Harvard Business Review, how 35% of the people, of the companies in the top quadrant are more successful as a result, and so on and so forth.
Right. Well, David, I wish we had even more time to spend together today. Unfortunately, we don't, but I really want to thank you for spending the time with me and for speaking to our audience so candidly. I so appreciate you being here. And that's a wrap for our DE&I symposium today at the BTN Group. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks to Beth and David for that enlightening conversation. I hope you enjoyed today's content and speakers, and I hope that you'll join us again on July 13th for the second part of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Symposium series. And I would encourage you to share the information with your colleagues. Registration is still open, so they can sign up for the second part of the series as well. And here's just a sampling of the many great speakers we have confirmed for that part of the series. We have a number of events already confirmed for the second part of the year, so please keep an eye out on your email, or as always, check out the Business Travel News website for an update on events to be confirmed later in the year. Thank you once again for joining us today. Please be on the lookout for a survey, as we would appreciate your feedback as always. And I do once again want to thank our bronze sponsors for today's event, American Express Global Business Travel and DEEM. So please enjoy the rest of the day, and we will leave the virtual ballroom open so you can enjoy some networking. Thanks again and have a great day.